Okay. So with this, I'm going to try not to spend too long with it because I feel like the shorter we can make this, the kind of less you have to follow along and watch it so intently. I just want to try to get to the basics and the information. Today I want to do something where, let me go to my preview. This is just like a little thing that I messed around with last night. And it's taking that egg that we made, we're just kind of scaling it up, kind of making it bounce a little bit, and then kind of adding a jiggle effect, like not much to it. So I'm going to close this project and we're going to kind of start fresh. And before we get into importing that, what I want to do is go to my egg file here. Whenever I was importing this last night, I was having problems because everything was like importing on one layer and I didn't understand why. And then I actually looked at my file a little bit more closely and I realized I did everything on one layer whenever we worked on this. So what I did is I separated this out. Here's my layers. And I just separated the yolk from the white part and then the white and the yolk from the background. So those are completely separate layers. They're distinguished by these 3 different color categories. I know some people have like gotten in trouble where they will work within sublayers, and that won't work so well for you. So I'm going to save this as Coke Zack layered egg. All this is fine here. And I'm going to open this in Photoshop or import it into After Effects. So I'm going to go to File, Import, File. I'm going to leave this here for a second.
So for this project, did you want us to use our egg too, or did you want us to make something new?
I'm going to have you make something new, but you may practice with your egg. Okay, so here is what I want to bring in. This is sort of the important part though, because I want to import this as something specific, and I want to import it as this composition, retain layer sizes. I'm just going to hover it over this for a second so we can be sure that you're using that. Because if you don't do that, then our layers aren't going to be separated and then they're going to be out of order. Okay, retain layer sizes, import, and it will show up over here. I'm going to double click on this, and then it's all going to kind of import down into here, into my separate pieces. So, since my background, I'm not going to have move or anything, I was thinking about just locking it down, but I may like change the color of it at some point, even changing the opacity, but I'm gonna lock it down for now. And first thing I want to look at is these 2 layers, the egg yolk and the egg white. I'm going to hit these down arrows, and I want to hit the down arrows where it says transform. And this is really where all the meat and potatoes are whenever you're animating. It is talking about where your anchor point is, the position where this is on your screen, scale, rotation, and opacity. From there, you can add more things. We're going to be adding more to that So we could take in any effect and stick it on whatever layer that is, and then we could even animate that part as part of it. I want to start really simple though, and like let's start with this egg white. First thing I want to do is adjust the anchor point. I'll show you why. I want to make this so it's kind of scaling up. So I'm going to scale this down first to kind of show you how this works. Whenever I'm scaling this up, the anchor point is in the very center of this, so it's scaling up from the center going outwards. So what I want to do is change where this anchor point is, and I do that by clicking on this pan behind anchor point tool up here. It's next to the camera. I'm going to take that, I'm going to just drag it kind of near the bottom here. That way whenever I scale it, scaling up from that spot. And if I were rotating it, it would rotate from that pivot point too. May not seem too important right now, but it would be later, especially if like something more specific. Okay, I'm gonna scale this back up to 100 just to kind of come back where we started. This is the most important thing whenever you're animating in After Effects, and it lies in these areas here. These are your little stopwatches. They kind of look like little bombs or something, but it's a stopwatch. It says this is where I want to make an effect, or this is where I want something to happen, so it makes a keyframe. I want to make a scale adjustment on this very first frame here, so I'm going to click on the stopwatch. Whenever I do that, it turns blue, and I'm going to crank this down to, I'm just going to turn it to 0 so it's not even existent. And then I'm going to go about a second ahead, and I'm going to take this and blow this up to around 100. And whenever I do that, that first thing, they made a little diamond, and then this made a little diamond because I made an adjustment. And that just means that there's two changes that are happening there. So it's going from this scale to this scale. And I'm going to just hit my preview to see how that looks. Whoa. Hey, this is kind of good to show you.
I'm sorry, I might have just missed this. Did you have to do anything in particular to make the transformation like take the full duration? Like, is there a setting that just makes it go from point A to point B with nothing in between, or?
Yeah, like whatever I did here, so it's starting at 0, and then on this frame it's at 100. So what After Effects is going to do is it's only going to take whatever's happening in between those two frames. So it's just going to go straight to 0 to 100. If I wanted to change the speed of it, I can do it in a few different ways. Like, let's say here the scale is at 20%. Let's say I want to make that at 40. So you see that little slight kind of jump there?
Yeah. Okay.
So that will make those changes. I dragged this little blue thing over here so I can only look at the changes that are happening in between those spots. That's what you use this little part for. Okay, so one thing that I did was I accidentally dragged like one of these windows off to the side. I don't want it like that. This will very likely happen to you too. You can change this back by going to Window, Workspace, and then reset to default save layout. And then it's just going to go back to my regular way that I have that. Okay. So one thing that I want to do is I want to make this kind of bounce a little bit. Whenever you think about animation, one of the like whenever you're thinking about like the animation Bible or whatever, you're thinking about how you want your thing to have sort of a stretch and pull kind of thing happening. I want to do that with this. First of all, I'm going to close that. Stick this over here. Okay, so I'm going to have this, it's going to get this big, and it's going to go smaller a little bit here. So I brought it down like 10, and then I'm going to bring it back to like, 100 something here. I'm going to drag this whole part out so that I can see all the what's happening within that area. So it's doing sort of that little bump there. I might even want to take this beginning part and then scale it back down to 0. So then it's a looped effect. What I can do is like actually click on that little diamond whenever it's highlighted in blue. I can go to edit, copy, or control C or command C. I can copy that, and then I'm going to put it at the end. I go to edit, paste. And then it's going to paste that end 0 effect. So now whenever I do this, it's going to loop. Now let's say this is going too slow for me. One thing I can do is I can, like on my timeline, I can click and drag and then highlight all those. And maybe I want to bring them over here. I want to take this one over here. And then that's happening at like twice the speed. Does anyone have questions about any of this so far? Okay. This is where it gets like maybe a little complicated looking, but this is kind of, it's really helpful. This is your graph editor. Now what we've done so far, it's just going from 0 to 100 to 90 to 105, and that goes back to 0. What I want to do is go and make it more of a gradual thing, and I want to change the speed of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go graph editor. Do you see how jumpy that is? What I want to do is like change these to give it an easy ease. And you do that a couple different ways. You can easy ease it inside of the graph editor, or I'm going to highlight all of these, right click on it, and then go to keyframe assistant. And I'm going to just keep this highlighted for a second. Once I click on easy ease, it's going to change the little diamonds into like little hourglass looking things. But all that means is that instead of going from like a point to another point like that, it's going to gradually go to that point. And that's what you see a lot in these little animated effects. I've been watching people play Animal Crossing lately, and they have like these little loading effects in the lower right hand corner that are all like, After Effects animations. That might be kind of nice to look at because it's exactly kind of what we're doing here. I might find it later, but it's just really kind of simple stuff. Now, I'm going to easy ease all of these, and then we're going to go to our graph editor. Those swap over to hourglasses. I'm going to go graph editor, and now you can see how these are like all curvy. You see the big difference though between where it was before and what it's doing now. I'm going to control Z and go back to our this way. We're going to watch it like that. It has this uncomfortable amount of time where it because it's all uniform. We're not used to seeing things like that as being so uniform just in the real world. That's just because this easy ease is factoring in like velocity, like how something is slower from the start and it gets faster as it goes near the end. So I'm gonna redo my easy ease, and that's like much more comfortable looking. Another thing that you may notice as we're kind of watching the preview of this, we put the little anchor down there. That's where it's scaling up from. So it looks like it's growing rather than just coming out of nowhere. Okay. Now if I wanted to adjust this, I can take these little handles. I can move these around specifically. So if I do this, it's going to make it kind of go faster. That actually seems a little bit more comfortable because it's kind of happening quick, and then it's... Here, I'll do sort of an extreme example here. Probably gonna just undo whatever happens here, but I'm just curious. Yeah, that feels a little weird, but less is more. But I do kind of like that faster beginning part. So I'm going to adjust these slightly. Again, this is inside your graph editor. That's this little thing here. I think it looks like a caterpillar inside of a box or something. Okay. Let's do the same to this egg yolk. So I'm going to click on the graph editor again to get out of there. I'm going to hit the down arrow for this to kind of clean it up. And now for the egg yolk, I'm going to reset the anchor point for that. So I'm going to click on the pan behind part. I'm going to stick it kind of in that spot so we can grow out of there. Now I'm going to go to scale. I'm going to change this to 0. And I want this to kind of like pop out later. So I'm going to do something kind of clever with it, where let's say if I wanted it to get bigger now, I change this to 100. It's going to be like scaling up exactly with the egg itself. But I don't want this part to grow until like the egg white is there. So I'm going to hit undo. And this is whenever the egg white kind of is there, solid in place. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that this is set to 0 here as well. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to let my slider be in this spot here, and then I'm going to paste it. So now this is going to stay 0 that entire time. Now I'm going to have it grow. I'm going to have this go up to 100. I'm going to have this kind of go oversized too, so I'm going to scale this down. And I'm going to scale it back up again. I'm going to copy this, the beginning part where it was at 0 again, and then I'm going to paste it at the end. Okay, so then the egg white's there, then my egg yolk grows, it kind of bounces a little bit, and then it's going down the same kind of size. But they're kind of separate there. I'm going to do something special with that in a minute. Before I do that, I want to easy ease these as well. So I'm going to right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease. Okay, so that's doing its thing. Next, what I want to do is, whenever this is scaling down, here's the problem where they're separated from each other. So I want to have the egg yolk kind of stick to the egg. I can do this a few different ways. One, I can parent and partner these things together, which I'm wondering if that would work well enough. I'm gonna try it. Yeah, never mind. So what I just did was a parent kind of partner thing. It's these little curly cues. If you click and drag on those and you drag it to another layer, that means that this egg yolk is going to be connected to this egg white layer. And you can do this infinitely with however many layers that you want. But that's how, let's say you have a character and it has like arms, legs, a torso, and a head. You can have those in separate layers and then parent and partner them all together. So then they all, if you move the body, then the legs and the arms kind of move with it too. But we can kind of do that later. With this, I was just kind of hoping that I could keep it in the same spot. But okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with position. I'm going to set the little timer. I'm going to click that. I want to keep it in the same position there. And then I'm going to kind of keyframe this so it goes down. I'm actually going to just do this by hand where I'll lock this. Wait, I need to have I wasn't on the right tool. Okay, so I want this to move along with the egg white. I'm going to take this, I'm going to drag it and kind of move it here just by hand. And you can see there, whenever I drag it, this little thing appears. This just means that that's the path that it's making from one position to another position. Whenever we look at this, it looks a little awkward because it like starts beelining right there, just right towards the middle. So what I can do here is like kind of easy ease this as well by kind of curving that slightly. Oops. And whenever I curve that, whenever it goes on that path, it is a little less awkward than point A to point B. I'm gonna do that. Okay. Getting pretty small here. It's funny. All right. Let's check our animation. So it feels a little weird in one of these parts, I think because it is kind of doing that path in a strange way. So what I might do is just adjust this slightly where it makes a more naturalistic looking path. Okay. So then there's our little egg graphic where it's just kind of popping up. Does anyone have questions with any of this stuff so far? Okay, I'm gonna easy ease these as well. I'm gonna right click keyframe assistant, easy ease. That actually kind of helped it smooth, like it's a little bit more smooth whenever it goes inside there again. Okay, this last part, I want to add an effect. And one of the effects I'm going to use is just like kind of a basic one that people use in like little graphic animations like this. And it's just turbulence. And what the turbulence is going to do is it's going to kind of give it a little bit of a wave. I'm kind of thinking about that egg white whenever you're cooking it. It kind of does a little wave to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to effects and presets and type in turb. Anything, if I'm looking for it, if I just type it in the search bar, it'll find it for you. I typically just do that. I'm going to do turbulent displace. I'm going to click and drag this to the egg white. I'm going to unlock it first. I'm going to click and drag it. Okay. So what this has done is, here's where all my scale things are. Now I've added an effect. I'm going to click on the down arrow on effects. I'm going to click down on this. And this has given me several more options to work with. Just by default, it's kind of has already added some kind of weird turbulence to it. What I want to do is kind of set this down to nothing, so it's kind of basic. I'm going to click on my stopwatch too. I want to make sure that I click on it at the beginning. I'm going to do displacement, amount, size. Really, I could click all of these if I wanted to, but it's only going to make adjustments if I do an adjustment with my variables. So here, I'm just going to say that the amount is like an 11. Okay, that hasn't done too much. Let me do that. Okay. Over here, I'm going to bring the amount back down to 0. So there's that 25. I might make it a little bit more. I can change the size of the turbulence, so it might do something like this. Now it looked like, I don't know, China, what effect did you use to make your text melt?
Let me look, because it wasn't that.
Yeah, like, you must have used, like, you know, something kind of similar, but same
It was-
idea.
I remember having to deal with like curve graphs and like let me open it up.
I'm going to easy ease these. I'm going to watch this again. Okay. So size, it goes from 100 to 26, and then it's staying at 26. I want to make sure that at the end, I'm going to make this 100 again. So then it's going to be kind of doing that ripple the entire time. Okay. Now, right now, this might be kind of going a little fast. So what I want to do is I'm going to drag this out a little bit longer. And this is something that might happen to you. Like, okay, I've got all my effects like everywhere, but I want to stretch these out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at all of my keyframes at once. And this is like one of the most important like hotkeys to know about. And it's the U key. U is umbrella. So if I hit U, it's going to show like all of my hotkeys or all my keyframes.
So I think actually what it told me to do was just do an adjustment layer, and then use blur, and then with the levels make it all. I don't know. It really distorted it in levels, and then it just kind of like I had everything drop down and then disappear into a drawing that I did. Like the puddle is kind of like the egg whites.
Okay. I see. Like, just the way that you did it was really nice because it was more controlled, and I don't know, there's something really good about it. I think if you're going to kind of play around with it some more, you'll go into your graph editor and then kind of play around with the speed in some of those parts, especially like near the end. Okay, so what I did is I pressed the U key and it's showing everything. One thing that I noticed before, I had the egg yolk layer locked, and whenever I hit the U key it didn't show up. But anyway, I'm going to select these layers. I'm going to select all those keyframes, and I could move it like that, and it's just going to move around as one big chunk. But if I hold down Alt on my keyboard, if you're on a Mac, I think it's if you hold down Option. But if I click and I drag this, then it's going to drag it out relatively. So it's just going to stretch it out at, you know, whatever size that is. And I won't have to re-keyframe anything. So now whenever I watch that, it's a little bit more, that actually feels way more comfortable, like speed-wise. Okay. And, you know, the reason why I was doing sort of a demo like this is because you see it constantly in like current graphic design where things are kind of like growing and popping out, or you look at commercials and it has like, you know, little graphics very similar to this. What that means is they're just basically hiring people like you to do like little infographics, and this is sort of like the exercise I want you to start with, so then you kind of understand like some of these ideas or principles, and then eventually I want to work up to something that's a little bit more complicated, that's going to involve a few different things. Let me show you an example here. I think in the last email I sent, I had just kind of included this or something like that, where it's kind of like this looped animation, and there's other things kind of happening in here. This maybe isn't the best example in the world, but this has like a little rainy thing happening back here. That's something that you could easily kind of have repeat in After Effects. This would be a frame-by-frame animation thing that I want us to do as well. With this, we're going to do some little bit of rotoscoping, and I have some tutorials on how to do rotoscoping in Adobe Animate if you look at my YouTube page. But I'm going to do some rotoscoping within After Effects because Animate's sort of dying out, and I don't want to use a program that's practically dead.
Hey, Zach.
Mm-hmm.
Joel said his connection crashed, so he is waiting to get back into it.
Okay.
Into the room. He just asked if you could let him in.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Joel, what I was just saying, I'm going to, not this weekend. I don't want to, push you into this right now, but I just want you to be thinking about like a scene that you're going to be creating where you can have some kind of interesting looped animation stuff happening within it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like this. Let me go back to some of our old examples. Okay. So I just use that as like, that's one possibility. Let's look at, it was like the professional illustrator folder. Yeah, there's an ISO grid if anyone needs that as like a something that you'd do a isometric kind of thing on. You may even want to do like an isometric animation. Yeah, here we go. Vector illustrators. Let's look at this old Charmander here. Now, if I were kind of dissecting this, do you see like whenever each little character comes in, they kind of bounce and they stretch a little bit? What they're doing, it's just a lot of different little shapes and layers, and they're just readjusting the position. They have some of these parented onto different spots, like on this head, they have parented those eyes, nose, mouth, and all of that. And they're able to kind of move things around while that's still intact. I'm kind of like trying to dissect how they do like some of these things. Like old toaster's got a little thing in there, it's popping out. That's doing its thing. I'm curious how they do the coins though. Okay, so the coins, I was just looking at them. There's like a front view where it's just kind of doing that. Then there's like a 3/4 view, then a side view. But just with those 3 frames, they're able to make it seem that much more realistic. Let's look at this one. Now this kind of stuff is obviously like more complicated than what we're doing, but it's basically if you had something more complex like your illustration that you just made, you could take that and load it into After Effects and practice with that and see what you could do. All this animation is doing really is like taking these different layers and then taking the positions of them and then stretching them out to the sides, and then that's it. It's adjusting the wave a little bit. Things are just kind of moving back and forth, left to right. The crab does like a little something special that's rotating. One thing that feels so good about this though is the kind of real world physics that it's putting in here. Like them just being in the car and those balls kind of moving around, that just feels so natural. You might not notice it at first, like, but if it didn't have that, it would feel more stiff. Let's look at this one. So this just has like, 100 different things happening at once. Once we have like our egg animation like this, let's say this would just be one part of like a bigger animation. Like what if I had like a little pan and someone was flipping it or something? Instead of it growing, it just does like the little ripple effect like it's cooking. Then maybe I have like little steam lines where I adjust the opacity or something. You're just kind of, I like this one a lot. So basically they just have a scene with a lot of different layers and things with it, but now what they've done is they loaded it into After Effects, and then they're just like like that chair that he bounces on, it just kind of wobbles back and forth. Like that's something that we could very easily do just, you know, within After Effects. It kind of wobbles in a more naturalistic way, so it's definitely easy eased. Whenever he jumps on the couch here, it kind of pushes in a little bit. That's something that we could work with as well, where we adjust like something with the push pins. And I might show you how to do something like that coming up. But does anyone have questions about any of this stuff so far? I haven't been exactly clear about like what I want specifically for this project yet. I'm showing you these examples really just to kind of get your brain thinking about it. So don't worry necessarily about you know, getting started on it this weekend. I just want you to think about it. Like, what could he do for like a nice little looped animation? And just by that looping idea, that cat, it kept running in the apartment and it never stopped. It never stops. It can continue forever. That's what I just want to work with these looped animations. Now this one's doing something kind of interesting. It's called parallaxing. That's whenever you have your foreground, middle ground, background kind of moving at a certain pace, and this just repeats over and over and over. This is where math kind of helps you out for once, where you're thinking about what frame things need to stop on. And if you're interested though, I was thinking about just doing a parallaxing project at one point, just because it's kind of fun and interesting to work with. But you just have to get your speeds right. Okay. This one's pretty nice. See how these guys are kind of like bendy? There's little ways that you can work that, and maybe since we have time I'll show you. And that's with this little push pin tool. I'm gonna see if I have a pre-made character that I could use. I'm gonna go into Photoshop and just make something really quick. Okay, so here's a Manet painting. I'm gonna cut out one of these people. I'll cut out several of the people. Maybe like these two. Cutting out this hole here because whenever I'm going to be animating these in kind of a interesting way, where I'm going to be using like little puppet push pins, and I need to have like those empty gaps in there or else it won't work, at least the way that I want it to. Okay. I'm gonna cut them out. Go file or edit cut. And then I'm gonna paste them in place here. So I can kind of move them around. I'm gonna hide that really quick because I want to fill this space in with, you know, just that background junk. I hope this works here. Taking a big risk. I'm gonna do like the fill content aware. Okay, good enough. I'm gonna bring them back in. I'm gonna save this as man A. I'm gonna keep this as a PSD. Okay, I'm gonna make a new project here. I import my file. There's man A. I'm gonna retain layer sizes and import it. I'm looking at these two, editable layer styles or merge layer styles. I'm gonna try editable first, but that might not work. Okay, that's fine. So editable layer styles, I've got these two doing separate things. I'm gonna lock down my background. And this is my people layer. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. Now here's my puppet push pins. I'm gonna click on this and I'm gonna start kind of putting this where some of his joints are. And wherever I put these pins, that's where I'm gonna be able to like click and move parts of it. I know I'm kind of all over the place right now, but it'll make sense in a second. Okay. So down here, this is where I have like all my kind of puppet things happening. I'm going to, like, let's say I want to raise his hand up a little bit. So I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this and then kind of move it slightly. And say so these two things are like happening in different positions. So there's part one, there's part two. Might have him reaching out a little bit more. I'm gonna take this and then we'll look at our animation. I'm gonna hit the U key. Whenever I hit U, this is actually showing me where my keyframes are located, and it's happening within these pins. So I'm gonna right click on that and easy ease them. I'm gonna press play. So now he's kind of reaching towards her. Here's another thing that you can do. Here's like my push pin. I'm gonna add some starch to it. So here's a puppet starch. Whenever you add starch to, you know, clothes, it just makes it more stiff. Same thing here. If I'm adding starch to this area, all I'm saying is I want to keep this a little bit more stiff and kind of together. So I'm going to add some starch to his fingers. Now I'm going to go back to my puppet pin tool, and whenever I move this around, it's a little bit more, you know, together. Let's go all the way here. So those are like really kind of basic ways that you can kind of animate these. I was being a little bit more goofy there, but you can be pretty subtle with it. Yeah, I'm going back to where before I starched a bunch. Okay, let's say I wanted her leg to be kind of here, and then it kind of like moves slightly. All right, now let's look at what I have. And you know, obviously, I think if I were going to mess around with this painting some more, I would separate these people on separate layers so then I could affect them a little bit better. But does anyone have like questions about this in particular? I think this can be kind of fun to mess around with. I'm gonna like make a folder with some paintings in there. I'm gonna have you do sort of an example like this too. What I want to do with this is I want these things that kind of happen again. So I'm going to take all these, copy them, and then go to this end here. Go to edit, paste. And those were all the things that were happening in her head and face. So then it will kind of go back. I think the whole thing that I want you to kind of do whenever you're working on these examples is to have your pieces go back in place afterwards. So what I'm going to do here is copy those, and that's like everything happening in his hand. I'm going to paste them over here. Now I'm going to preview it. So now her head's moving and then his hand's kind of moving back and forth. This almost looks violent, like he's got a gun or something. Like, I don't know, there might be some kind of goofy things that you can add in there too. I think before I showed you an example of that scorpion dagger guy. Now whenever you look at this guy's work, it's like, what I do all the time is I look at people's work and I dissect it and I kind of figure out how they did things. So whenever I'm looking at this, a lot of it is just like what we just did. That little shape that's going over there is just like a little painted opacity thing. This is a really good one. This is doing some parallaxing too. See that tree that goes by? There's several trees. Okay, does anyone have like questions about anything that we've done that you're maybe confused about that I can clear up before I talk about what I want you to do? Okay. Let's save this as man A. Okay, so this is what I want you to do. I want you to do 2 exercises that will be due on Tuesday. And one of them is going to be like what we just did here. So I want you to be using the puppet pin tools. What I did originally was just went inside of Photoshop here and I separated out these layers. If if you remember, I filled in the space. Something that's kind of interesting that happened there was I filled it in, but we didn't even really notice it that much because it's just a bunch of green junk. So whenever I take them away, that lady's head reappeared right there. So you may want to clean it up a little bit more than I did. But I want you to separate those in like little layers and then import them into After Effects. And I want you to make like a kind of subtle looped animation. And if you wanted to have some fun with it too, by all means, you can add in like different stuff. I'm seeing if I can, I don't know, I just have this bat right here that I just saw. Well, it's not. I thought it was transparent. This might be transparent. Yeah, like here's like little sparkles. Let's say, you know, this guy is kind of, I don't know, you might find something that you like. Here's where those little sparkles are. If I copy and paste that, I can make this, you know, go longer. There's also a way where you can make the GIF go on forever, but I'm just doing that so it's quicker. But there could be like little fun additions that you make in there, props. You're more than welcome to. I think the more you can kind of have fun with it, the better. Let's see if, oh, it's got a black background. I guess I could just knock out the black though. I forget how to use the green screen thing. Okay, effect keying. There we go. Except I'm losing the black on him, so I could get rid of some parts, but it's good enough for me. Say he's here. There we go. Perfect. It's kind of interesting too. Okay, so this will be one part. Now the other thing that I want you to do is, so we had that egg that I was working on. You may use that as just something to practice on. But what I want you to do is make your own kind of graphic. I want to make it like an object or an object with a few different pieces to it. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to open up our egg. So with this, it had 3 different layers. It had the yolk, the white, and then the background. I want you to have like 3 different layers to it. So let's say you made a very basic like cupcake graphic, and you know, you made the cupcake base and then you had icing kind of like fall down on it or something. You don't necessarily have to have it grow, but I want you to do something that is sort of fun and repeatable. I was thinking, you know, you could work with like a little tiny graphic of a house that's kind of like sprouting up, or like some trees that are blowing up too. That could be kind of interesting. Really anything that you want that is kind of like what we did in our previous illustration project. One of the main things I want you to think about with this though is with your graphic, make sure that it has like at least 2 different values to it. So here our egg yolk is like got a dark, middle tone, light. This has a middle tone and a dark. So with those alone, that kind of makes it a more attractive looking graphic. So first thing I want you to do is I'm going to upload some kind of old master paintings I want you to dissect in Photoshop and then use Puppet tools with, and make it repeatable. And ideally you can kind of like make a little funny story out of it. And then number 2, I want you to work on a basic graphic, and I just want you to work with things like position and scale and rotation. And I want to see you use like Easy Ease, your graph editor, all that stuff, and then export them as either GIFs or MP4s, maybe both. Okay, any questions with that? Okay, so you all feel good about moving on and working with your graphics. Last thing I'll say before we kind of wrap it up for the day is we're working on these exercises here, but I want you to start thinking about what you might do for a larger kind of animated piece. And by that I mean it has several parts to it. It's got a background, a foreground, middle ground, has different people or characters in it. It doesn't have to be a full-length feature. What I'm saying is it can even just be something kind of simple, where it has like something happening through a window and then you have a frame-by-frame animation of a character that you made. We'll talk about rotoscoping on Tuesday though, I think. Tuesday or Thursday. Okay. Are you sure there's no other questions before we end it? Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this video and I'll upload it just straight to YouTube, so then you can go back and look at everything that we did. And if you have any questions, shoot me an email and I'll try to help out. Usually what I've been doing is making small walkthroughs if people are having a particular issue with something that's kind of specific. But let me know if you have trouble and I'll try to help out as best as I can. Alright, you're free to go. Have a good weekend. These will be due on Tuesday. Alright, bye.